is, so that we all know what we're agreeing to do together. So if you could say your name and what your role on this committee might be.
Okay. I'm Kara Foley, despite what it says in front of me. And I'm the regional manager for Wilmaki Real Estate and formerly Foley Real Estate. So I thought we do have short-term rentals, so I thought we could share some insight on that.
So you're sharing the real estate agent's representative
Yes.
seat. Good, thank you. Sari?
I'm Sari Budrow, zoning assistant in the building department.
I'm Doug Brown, select board member, and I think I might have been the initial proponent of us discussing this. I actually have a short-term rental, little cottage over in East Falmouth, so I have some knowledge about how it works.
Charlotte Harris, I'm on the planning board, currently chair of it, and have been very interested in attacking this issue because I think it's important for Falmouth. And I certainly welcomed it when Doug showed up at the planning board and wanted to do this, so thank you, Doug. And now we are.
I'm Scott McGann, I'm the health agent, and we're responsible right now for registration of rentals and also enforcement of the housing code.
I'm Melinda Tondera. I'm the assistant town planner. I'll be in kind of the in-charge person of the admin part of this group.
Jed Cornock, town planner, here to support the planning board and to help create whatever we come out of this working group.
And I'm Maura O'Keefe from Town Council, and I'm here to support and be a resource and to assist along the way.
Thank you. There aren't that many of you, so I wonder if you want to take a minute to say who you are also. Could we just do that? Do you mind?
Voluntary.
Okay, I'm Gail Kenny. I'm a real estate agent with Wilmaki. I work with Kara. I'm also a homeowner in Falmouth.
I'm Erica. I'm with Kara. My name is up there. We're all real estate agents at Foley and Wilmaki, and we handle 100 short-term rentals at the moment. I'm Liz Klein. I'm a science teacher in town, and I'm part of the group that has been working with the Affordable Housing Committee with respect to short-term rentals.
Joe Bowenstein. I live in the Seacoast Shores, and I actually manage some rental property off Cape.
Right behind you and then down that row?
Carol Later. I'm a resident of Falmouth.
Martin Scally. I'm a selector.
And behind Bob?
Hillary Morrison, I'm a resident and concerned about the lack of affordable housing.
I'm Molly Moynihan. I'm with the Marine Biological Laboratory. I currently live in a seasonal rental and also represent the Housing Committee for the Marine Biological Laboratory, and we're really concerned about short-term rentals and the impact on our community.
I'm Hannah Vanishern. I'm a research assistant at the Marine Biological Laboratory and also a ranger in Falmouth. So curious to learn more about this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Renshaw, town manager.
Kelly McKeon. I'm a renter in Falmouth.
Hi, Yukma Sean, also a renter in Falmouth. I've been renting for the past 7-8 years, and I've seen a lot of places turn from year-round to short-term rentals.
We're Martina and Eric Kahn. We're homeowners in East Falmouth. We're thankful that you're actually going to look into short-term rental laws, enforcement of them. We've had a lot of issues with the neighbor, and we're delighted that you're actually going to be addressing them. So thank you.
And next to you?
We're together.
I'm Todd Morrison with Hillary Morrison.
Thank you all for coming. I'm glad that you're here. I'm hoping that there's plenty of time and that you are willing to join the conversation. So, what is it we're doing today? Oh, sorry. As good as it gets. I don't think it actually acts as a mic.
It does if it's turned up. How's that? Any louder?
Is that better?
A little bit better.
Not really.
At a certain point, you have feedback, so we'll turn up to 5.
And we'll see what
How does that
happens.
sound
Is
now?
that better?
Is that better? It doesn't.
If we don't use electric guitars, we'll be okay.
I'll try to speak up. I'm sorry that my voice isn't that loud. Today's agenda, and you probably got a copy of it in your hands. And what we're trying to do, we're starting with the assumption that short-term rentals have been enough of a problem that we ought to look into it. And that's based on what we read in the newspapers and just anecdotes among ourselves. So it doesn't have a good basis in fact yet. So what we want to do first is find out what is the situation. And the people here with us are the ones who have the most to do with it in the town and can help us with that. And as we keep meeting, we'll be building up our fact base so that in the end, when we decide to do or not do something, it will be based on what Falmouth's facts are, not what suppositions are among either us or the general public. You'll have plenty of chance to add your comments as we go along. These, although we're a working group and we're duly formed, it will be relatively informal so that it's easy for you to participate, I hope. So today, first the thing we're going to do is decide on officer positions for this working group. So we need a chair, we need a vice chair to step in the next time I get a bad cold, and probably a clerk. So, nominations for chair.
Well, it's a planning board initiative, and if you'd be willing, I would nominate you as chair, since it's
I accept.
planning office.
Are there any other nominations? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
So, vice chair, willing to step up? I nominate.
I'd be willing to do it if you want me to.
Thank you. All in favor? Right. Good. And for clerk, this is actually work. Someone who's willing to take the notes for us, and I guess I nominate Melinda.
Uh-huh.
No surprise there. Are you willing to accept?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have the officers that we need. So now we're going to talk first about what are the current town processes. What do we do about short-term rentals now? And I'm not sure who knows the most. I think it's Scott McGann.
Yeah. Is this loud enough for everybody? Okay. So let's step back. So what the health department's responsible for by statute is the state housing code, which would be things like heat, hot water, stove, so forth. And so we generally enforce the housing. We enforce the housing code, issue orders to correct, and that is what we have to do as health agents. And in 1975, you can see up on the screen, there was a bylaw written requiring registration of rentals. So over time, as we do housing inspections, especially if you look back, even 10 years ago, we don't know who necessarily is renting and who's not on any particular street, is when we do our housing inspections, we would have them register as rentals. And so this registration bylaw that went into effect in 1975 basically says that if you have a rental, it doesn't discern between short-term and long-term. It just essentially says that you have to register with the health department on an annual basis. It assumes 2 per bedroom and gives the health department leeway on determining occupancy. And what that really meant was, in the housing code, it actually uses square footage to determine occupancy. So if somebody had a very large bedroom, they may be able to have 2, but that would require us to walk through and determine a different occupancy. So we normally default to the bedrooms times 2, and they'd have to do it to register their rental. We have not historically done a very good job. We only capture a few hundred, maybe 200 and 250. It's because we never really went and sought them out. It was just how it always was. I was the assistant here from 2002 to 2015, and that's just sort of the way it was. I came back as the agent in 2018. We started working on these new rental company agencies that go out and capture the rental lists. That's a relatively new thing. We started that in 2019, but a little thing called COVID came in 2020, so we didn't pursue it after the 2019. And starting to look back up and getting back into trying to capture where the rentals actually are. So we don't do a very good job capturing all the rentals. When we do get them through housing inspections, or if a resident complains and we look at the house and we follow up and we find that the person's not registered, we'd have them registered at that point. The registration isn't an inspection. The inspection would come based on the housing code request. A tenant calls us tomorrow and asks, 5 Main Street, I have no electricity. I feel it's commingling of electricity. My neighbor's getting there are outdoor lights based on mine, or I have no hot water, we could come out that day or the next day, do a housing inspection, issue an order of correction. So it's going to be based on complaints. And that's what we've historically done. So we haven't done a good job capturing the quantity of rentals, mainly because we haven't been out pursuing them. There is quite a bit of labor in trying to get them. There are companies now that will help us, but we haven't gotten to a point where we have chosen one or gotten to that point. So, again, our main public health is the housing code. We make sure if you're a tenant and you lost your heat in February that we get down and get the landlord. And those are very monumental things. I actually had a housing inspection over the winter. There was a request for all the paperwork, and there was over 100 pages of documents just in that one housing inspection. So they can get quite difficult. It's a lot of times it's a relationship that's sort of devolved between the tenant and landlord. So housing is a bear for us. It is very labor intensive. An average housing inspection with the back and forths and the emails and things might be 20 to 40 hours on a single housing inspection. So that's where our focus is based on requests by an occupant for a housing inspection. And so the rental thing is just there. It's really just not, some people are doing it every year. The vast majority aren't. We're not capturing nearly enough at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder, Scott, if you could give us a sense of quantities. How many houses in Falmouth? How many of them you estimate to be rental houses? How many short-term rentals? Only guesses if you have guesses.
Well,
but
they would definitely be guesses. And remember, this doesn't discern between short-term and long-term, right?
Right.
That bylaw does. I would say we have somewhere around 21,000 homes in town. The last time I checked, it seemed to be a pretty good number. If I had to guess on how many short-term rentals, I'd say it's probably 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say there's probably another. There's been a shift, obviously, between long-term and short-term, hence the reason why we're kind of here, I would say. There's probably a couple thousand long-term rentals on top of it. So I'd say, 5,000 of the 21,000, probably a light number. The real estate world might know a little bit better than that, but that would be my guess on that.
Interesting that even just a guess that you think that's probably more short-term than long-term. Just a guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, most of our housing inspections are not short-term. The problem with short-term, think about it, right? So somebody calls me up for a housing inspection, but they're only there for a week. So they're going to call, a lot of times they're going to call on a Monday. I just was at the worst house ever. Well, I can't go to the next people that are in the house, knock on the door and just go in, right? I can't go on property or in property without a warrant, right? So unless I'm invited in. And so there's another group of people there. So it gets problematic on even how to determine sometimes when we get a complaint on short term. Most of our housing inspections are on long-term rentals. So somebody's been there for 6-8 months and, they have no heat in January, and we need to get on that. And the order of corrections is 12 hours.
I have a question on that. So some of the other towns do pre-inspections? So like when some of the other towns, before they can rent their property, the town has to come out and inspect?
Yeah, so I don't know if they do every one. So here's the thing about that. So if we do have 5,000 rentals, a really good inspector might get to 7 or 8 a day, okay? And then I would say 30% of them would have an issue, right? So you got to go back. So you're kind of going back in that loop, right? So you can do that. We don't have, individuals that would do sort of that at this point in time, right? And I would hate to pull somebody off doing food inspections to do these routine housing over and over. I think Yarmouth has a dedicated person that does it, but I think it's like every 5 years before they would get into one. And additionally, things change quickly. That's why you do restaurants twice a year. The conditions change. So doing them as a pre-inspection would help us with things like the legality, the basement apartments and things that don't have egress and stuff like that. There would be a benefit to that. But it's in terms of heat working today versus not tomorrow, right? So I don't know how much it solves, but it's something we're looking into. It's more like how much staff and resources do you want to put to basically a housing department. I would think of 4 people off the top of my head would have to do that well, because you'd have somebody having to do a lot of the paperwork as well. So,
if you want to speak, could you go to the mic, please? I mean, I don't know.
That's okay.
I just had a question to follow up on the number estimate, and maybe Jed, this is maybe more directed towards you. I was at some of the meetings for the housing production plan, and I remember in that presentation that the consultants had some numbers for the % of seasonal versus year-round, and so maybe that
yeah, you could touch on that.
Yeah, I don't know it offhand, but I do know that they got that information from the Department of Revenue. So it's whatever the state has in their database that they were providing the report.
Which I will say on that, the state now requires the certificate numbers, you know, but they also don't really do a whole lot of follow-up on that. I mean, when the sales tax gets paid, it can be paid by a C number or a social security number. And I know in dealing with owners ourselves, because we require all the paperwork, but in dealing with owners, it's a very difficult, we have to really walk them through the task of getting those C numbers through Mass Tax Connect, and it's a difficult process. So some of them just say, you know, so I don't know that those numbers are even accurate.
Right. They're probably accurate for the people that are using the online platform, like the Airbnb or VRBO. I know I use Airbnb,
Yeah.
and I used it before the tax requirement came in play, and it was really a pain in the butt to get it going.
It's
It was
tough.
like starting a new business,
Yeah.
filing for the numbers and all.
And essentially it is, because it's asking you to create your entity.
Right.
And yeah, it can be, I mean, we require all that stuff, we won't even put it into our inventory until we have all the, you know, the health certificate and the C numbers and all that stuff.
Right.
But, you know, there are a lot of people that just go out there and rent their properties
Mm-hmm.
without.
Sure.
But I think for rough numbers, going with there are 21,000 homes in town, and of those, probably at least 5,000 are involved in renting of some kind, and maybe over 3,000 of them are short-term rentals. Anyone who wants to comment on the quantity of short-term rentals, yes, please, when you comment.
Numbers from the housing.
Oh, come and read them to us, great.
Excellent.
You won.
Hi. So Falmouth has about 21,000 total housing units, and according to the Housing Production Plan, 2,271 of those are year-round rental units. That's down 778 units from 2016. And I just looked on the public registry for registered rentals as of about a half an hour ago. There are 1,473 short-term rentals registered in the town of Falmouth.
And those would be registered with the state.
Those are registered with the state, but as alluded to by Scott, other communities have found that the number registered is a significant underestimate of those that are actually operating.
Right, so at the moment, there's really no enforcement for registration. Apparently statewide, we're not the only community like that. But we are in that situation where it's hard to get a handle on what the numbers are. So there's sort of an understanding by neighborhood where the problems are, but we don't have a really good fact base for it.
And there's also an exemption to those, for some of those, if they're rented under 14 days in one calendar year. So like some people will, you know, if they say, well, I just want the income for 14 days or 2 weeks, they'll just rent it out for those 2 weeks. So it's not necessarily a short-term rental for more than those 2 weeks. But then they have the exemption not to pay the sales tax and that kind of thing.
The state's definition of short-term rental, I think, is 31 days.
Or under.
Statute.
Or under,
Under
right.
30.
Yeah.
Up to 31 days
The
short-term.
exemption is, you have, so like if you're gonna rent, if you say, I'm gonna rent my property for 14 days or less, in the next calendar year, you have to tell them that ahead of time. They have to fill out the exemption form with the state in January, the year prior to.
The statute says not more than 31 days.
Yeah. So it's still considered a short-term rental, but it's 14 days a year.
But that's one that we probably don't need to concern ourselves
Right.
with too much, because that's not really a big impact.
Yeah.
Somebody that's living in there and renting it for a couple of weeks, that's not gonna change things too much.
Right, but they're also not gonna put it into a year-round.
But what it amounts to is a loophole, really.
Well, loophole, but it's primarily, I think, for people who own the house and use it, just need a little
Most
extra
likely, yeah,
income.
for like seasonal.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
It's only 14 days.
Okay, so your office would be checking up on them if they were to come to you?
You mean checking on them how? I mean,
Going
if they
to-
got a rental registration permit, they
Right.
get a permit, they're gonna get the permit, we're gonna determine occupancy, looking at assessors, perhaps a discussion. You know, assessors isn't always 100%. And we look at maybe the Title V as well. You go with an occupancy number on that, and then they've got the permit. It's done online through Permitize, our online registration, and it's, we'll look through the paperwork, and it's sort of an automatic registration at this point in time, and it doesn't discern between short-term and long-term. That's just all we're doing with this now. So it's not a lot.
It's not a lot.
No, I wouldn't tell you it's a lot. I mean, it's just sort of what we've done historically. Again, we did go look at it in 2019 as this sort of, I would say it started sometime around then. We really started to heat up, and, we started to look at that, but, we did get sidetracked. So we didn't pursue it in 19, 20, 21. And so there's companies out there that'll give you the list and will aid in their registration. So there are companies out there that'll do it, but they'll only do it for short term. It'll still leave us with long term, because the bylaw, as written currently, doesn't discern between the two.
And something we may want to talk about at one of our future meetings is there is these companies, and I've been speaking to somebody from one of them, and they're very anxious to sell us their software and work with us to identify them if we choose to look for that.
Yeah, if I may, one of the things you look at is how robust you want it. Now, you can easily, I can see where you can easily get them registered, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the regulation part that it's the determination of what's going on in a particular house has always been the problem, right? So we can make a very good regulation, but you have to also look at, I was just looking at town council, it's not, I have limitations, the department has limitations on how do we access that. Yes, on the computer, they're saying they're renting. We could say, they've got an occupancy that's higher than what we think they have, and that could be an issue. But, going to a property and making determinations, if we write a very robust regulation, the enforcement part is difficult because people have rights on their own property. We just can't.
Well, maybe
Right.
we should hear what the regulations are. Or I wonder if you'd be willing to fill us in on that.
What regulations?
I'd have to get a warrant,
Yeah.
right? I'd have to get an administrative warrant in order to go inside a property unless I'm invited in, is how I've always determined it.
And we don't,
We're not allowed to go.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I don't know that people are aware that there are not any regulations right now on short-term rentals.
Well, is that what you're looking for?
Yes,
So my answer is there aren't any.
there, thank you.
Oh, okay.
So but we do have models from other places that we could look at, but here in Falmouth, there aren't any.
That's right. There's this rental property, which is a general bylaw, which can be enforced to a certain extent. There are pieces of the zoning bylaw that can be interpreted to our advantage, depending on what the policy is that comes from this group. So depending on what direction this group recommends, there is language in the zoning bylaw already, but the first thing that this group needs to do, first and foremost, is to decide what to regulate and how to regulate it and where to regulate it.
Mhm.
So once that's determined, then I can tease out things that are already in the zoning bylaw and things that need to be added. Or alternatively, to amend this somehow.
Mhm.
You can do just a general bylaw or just a zoning bylaw, or you can have sort of a bifurcated way to regulate it. But I can't answer any of those questions, and I can't assist with drafting language until you guys decide what you want it to look like.
If I could share what my impetus was to start this conversation. So having a short-term rental, and I had two. I had a large house. When I got divorced, I realized it was kind of crazy me having this big house. So I rented that, and I moved into the little cottage. And I learned quickly that it's very important to be reading between the lines and screening the people that are coming to stay. Because I rented the house one time to some girls that wanted to have a college reunion. And it seemed very harmless. And so I rented to the college reunion, and my neighbor called up and she says, "Douglas, you've rented to a small country. What are you thinking?" And I went over there, and not only had they brought their girlfriends, but they brought their husbands and their kids, and they brought their friends, and it was a gigantic party going on, and it was just a crazy nightmare. And I realized right away I got to be a lot more careful. So then I ended up selling the big house, and now I still have the cottage, and we rent that on Airbnb. But you really have to be very careful, and I'm not sure everybody is, because I think a lot of people maybe are not here and seeing what's going on. Maybe they don't have a neighbor who's thoughtful enough to call and say what's going on. So that's one thing. The other thing was, I went to visit my daughter who lives in Virginia, and we decided to get an Airbnb in Maryland. So we're on the way down, making our plans to go, and I'm looking for Airbnbs. And there was quite a lot of them, but almost half of the ones, and there was hundreds on this, in this area, but almost half of them were owned by one corporation. And it got me thinking, wow, that could easily come to Falmouth. What we're used to here is, you know, a person owns a house and they want to rent it for part of the summer. You know, everybody needs a little extra income here. It's hard to get by. So certainly I don't want to curtail that, and I want to make sure that we're managing them correctly. But I really am scared of having a big corporation come in and buy up swaths of land and turn our whole community into a big profit margin. So that's where I'm coming from.
Well, where I'm coming from is sitting here on the planning board for, 5, 6, 7 years, hearing over and over that there's almost no place left to rent. The rentals have gone. Where did the rentals go? To which I had no particular answer. But it started to develop that the answer was what used to be year-round rentals, or at least winter rentals, which were pretty common, are no longer that. They're now turning into weekend and 1 week short-term rentals, and it's eating up our rental market and making our housing problem really much worse. With the same number of houses, although we increase the housing supply, we don't seem to be getting rentals that anybody can afford, or for the periods that people really want them. I think the most vocal group that's made itself known to the planning board have been the employees down in Woods Hole, who are really on an academic year, many of them, seasonal, and need short-term rentals, but their idea of short-term is several months. And the short-term rent affordability prevents them from doing short-term rentals. But we hear from other people who have to live over the bridge, and anyone who routinely drives to Boston, as I do, the traffic at the bridge over the years has grown really acute. And the reason it has is so many people who work here can't afford to live here. They're pouring onto the Cape in the morning, they're leaving the Cape in the afternoon. If you're trying to get to Boston in the afternoon, you have to plan for an extra 3/4 of an hour to get yourself over across the bridges. So it's sort of in that way that it came personally to me until there was a house available. I live on a street that has 9 houses. It's a dead end, and you know, I know pretty much everyone who's there. A person passed on, and that house has turned into a short-term rental. They put up a sign to say, you know, for rent, and I thought they couldn't have a sign. So I went down to the building department to say, what are the rules on signs? Oh yeah, they could have a sign, and they could leave the sign there. I thought, wow, pretty soon, because we're sort of close to not very close, but close enough to a beach, the street could turn into short-term rentals, which concerned me, that we would be constantly changing people. So gradually, it's just sort of dawned on us here that it's a problem. But I wonder what evidence of a problem you might bring into this. If you need to speak, please come here and give your name.
Hi, Molly Moynihan from the Marine Biological Laboratory. I just wanted to respond. So thank you for acknowledging, you know, the efforts we've been making and also the needs of our community. But I just wanted to specify that it's not only seasonal rentals that we need in the scientific community. Many of us are here year-round, but we're forced to move twice a year, which is incredibly stressful to find summer housing. Sometimes we move off the Cape, we couch surf. Sometimes people live in their cars. It has become a really desperate situation, and so I just wanted to make it known that in the scientific community, we really need year-round rentals. There are some members of the community that are just here on the academic calendar, but the majority of us are here year-round. So I just wanted to clarify that, and also thank you for acknowledging the needs of our community. So.
Anyone else who wishes to describe the problem from their point of view?
Joe Bowenstein from Seacoast Shores. I live opposite a short-term rental, okay? This particular party just bought this house a little over a year ago. Didn't ask anybody, bought a house that sleeps 11 people and has 3 parking spaces. Guess where they're parking?
On the street.
On the street, in an intersection. And one Sunday morning, they're double parking in the intersection. 2 trucks, 2 boats, another car parked outside. Another day I come out, we've got a strip of grass. My landscaper's coming to cut the lawn. I got a car parked over there. I go over, there's nobody home. There were 4 cars parked there the day before, okay? And they all took off for breakfast or something and left one vehicle. It's a problem. It's a big problem, okay? The other thing I've got to say is, this is a business. We live in a residential area. If we wanted, if we wanted to live in a business neighborhood, we'd move into the downtown. And every weekend, they turn over. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maine, plates from multiple different state plates on the cars. So it's not one family that's renting it. We've had fireworks go off in the middle of the night. Okay. The problem is, when you let short-term rental in, you're going to add to what the town has to do as far as maintaining it. The owner of this particular property doesn't live there normally. When he rents it out, he's gone. So the tenants are the problem of the people in the neighborhood, the police department, and something has to be changed.
Thank you.
I will say that if you have individual problems, if you can identify the platform that they're using and report it, say for instance Airbnb.
They're on Verbo.
Well, you can find the contact information for that management tool, and you can.
It's not management. This is the
VRBO itself.
Okay.
They do actually. You'll probably have to start with an email, but you might find a phone number. You can actually report the address, and they will send them a message. And if they don't straighten it out, they will lose their listing really quickly.
Let me say this. I went to the Board of Health.
Yeah.
Months ago. I went back. Are they listed with the Board of Health? No.
No.
I went back a couple of months later. Have they? And they said, "Well, we'll send them out a letter."
Yeah.
I went back a couple of months after that. Are they listed? No.
Right. But
So-
if you go directly to the platform that they're using and report it directly yourself as the neighbor that's affected, it's much more effective.
Okay. But that, I'm going to try to solve my own problem, is what
Well,
you're
I'm just
telling
saying
me. Okay. But what you guys are looking to do is eliminate the problems before we have them. We have to deal with them. I
Yeah.
mean, to be honest with you, I've dealt with the problem. There are 6 no parking signs down in that intersection.
Right.
Okay? And it took me 6 months to get them. I went to the Traffic Commission, and they approved the signs. The work order got lost, and for whatever reason. That's back in October. February 29th, 2 signs went up. I called the highway department, and they says, "Where's the rest of the signs?" So finally, they figured out where the rest of the signs are. And now I think there's 6 or 7 signs, because it's a T intersection.
Right.
Okay? And if they stop parking here, they're gonna move over here. So we had to cover the whole intersection. And I don't know what they're gonna do from there. Move up the street? Okay?
So you're saying that complaint and signage don't solve the problem? Yes.
Well, I haven't got that far yet. Signs are up. The season isn't here yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you, Martina Khan. I'm sort of going along to what he said. It's more the issue, we're here for the issue with the neighbors, because someone like Lamakia, you screen the people, and we have neighbors on our street who use you, and it's never an issue. We have good neighbors on our street who use Airbnb and all of those, and they take care of it, and we don't have issues. But we have an issue with one neighbor who has been told they can have 6 people in their house. They have up to 8 times that amount, 48 people. Apparently, we have been told nothing can be done by the town. Nothing. That doesn't seem right. We got them taken off of Airbnb. We got them taken off of other local listings who they were much more responsive than the national ones. Unfortunately, we saw over the weekend, they now had VRBO coming to their house and looking for a listing. They are only about the money, and not only are they renting this to up to 50 people when it's a 6-person house and really only a 2-bedroom, and they were now given permission this year to have 6 people, but they host disgusting, I apologize to use this word in public, but they have sex orgies at the house. They have stripper shows. They have bachelor parties, bachelorette parties. Nobody cares. We're told, call the cops. Call the cops again. Call the cops. Call the cops. That's the only apparent way we have to deal with it, which I know part of the reason is why this committee is done, because we are not the only 2 homes or homeowners in this town who have this issue. And thank goodness that you are here to address it. But that's something else. And I know that you're looking to what different laws and how to do it. The closest example is the town of Barnstable. They have a wonderful process, and I will say they have a 24/7-hour hotline where you can call in complaints about neighbors, noise, occupancy, and other things like that. My mother-in-law rented her home for 20 years in the town of Hyannis, and they came and they did inspections almost yearly on her home, and they made sure, and she had to have signage posted saying this is the legal number of bedrooms, the legal number of occupants, how many people can park in the driveway, how many people can park in the driveway overnight. Very strong laws, so I would definitely, it's on their website, definitely a place to look and use it as an example. But again, thank you for wanting to deal with it. And I know we can't get much done by this summer, but if it's only one more summer, that would be great.
We're looking at what cycle we can be on.
Yes,
We're
that
hoping.
would be great,
Right.
thank you, as long as it's not forever. Thank you.
Scott?
So she's absolutely correct. We spoke last year. As we think about regulations, we also have to think about, how we're going to do it, right? So like Barnstable, making a determination by cars if that's legal or not, how we're going to actually. So it has to be in such a manner that I have teeth, okay? So that's important to have the teeth. And also, as you consider this, it's also going to be considered, for example, Barnstable has 16 health agents. So you have to think about how many health agents you got here versus how many health agents, and we'll have to think about developing a sort of a department that would have to be zoning and a little piece of health, right? Because there's the health and the housing code, right? But this is primarily a zoning issue, right? So the zoning has to sort of mesh in this, and it has to have teeth. And that's where there's not a lot of teeth in that, and making determinations. So, what'll happen over time is Monday will be the great time. So the weekends are usually the worst week, right? The time of the week. So I get a call on Monday about the property. There was a lot of cars there over the weekend. So, who's going out, in the hotline, and who's manning the hotline, and who's going out, and then it has to be written clearly, or I would agree. Would you agree on that? That it would have to be written pretty clearly on how, am I allowed to walk on the property and say, you got 6 cars, you've got to kick 2 out, and I got to call a police officer, bring them out? Like, how am I going to do that is what I need to know. And I have to, because it's the lack of teeth is going on a Monday and having a new set of cars, so somebody has to go out on a Sunday and somebody's going to have to go out on a Saturday, and if that's how you want to do it, I'm just wondering, it has to.
Something you could put on the owner, though, like, if the owner's registered, is that something you could put on them where there's fines, or if they can't handle their own tenants? Like, I know for us, if we get calls on the weekends, we are gonna call the owner and say, hey, you need to fix this.
We would too, yes. We would call the owner,
But,
sure.
like, if there was some sort of like, if, they have skin in the game where if you can't keep your tenants in line, then we're gonna have to fine you as the owner, or you lose,
Or suspend your
Yes,
registration.
okay, so when we go to fines, I'm just bringing this on what's going to happen. So we bring on fines, we'll also need to know when they appeal the fine, like what's going to happen.
I think before we get to.
I'm just going down the weeds a little bit with it, right?
You are.
Yeah, I know.
Prematurely, I would say. Let's have a full description of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
For the problem we're trying to solve, then we can get to parts of the solution.
Yeah.
For one thing, Massachusetts land courts have already grappled with this. Some of our problems have already been answered for us, so that we'll be looking at that. But when we get to it, it's not just a zoning problem. It's very much of an enforcement problem. How do you do this? Is the main ticket that nearly every resort community in America has this problem. Many have tried to solve it. There are a lot of models, so we can build off what they've learned and what we're learning here. So please go ahead.
Hi there, Hannah Vanderschuren. Ms. Harris, you addressed some of the issues that people who may live here year-round but need to rent seasonally experience, and I just want to touch base on that from what I know about that experience too. So like Molly commented on, we have people who might rent a winter rental for 9 months and then need to find summer housing. Often people are at a point where they need to start looking for housing that's 45 or 50 minutes away because that's what they can afford, is off the bridge now. I have friends who live in a winter rental and their rent, if they were to stay there, would triple in the span of a month. And then some of the, regulating or doing inspections prior, I think would really help the problem, just based on some of the places that people find online too that would be local. I know friends who have toured places that have been a walk-in closet that they've had to live in, or no bathroom in the house, or no place to cook a meal. So these are all things that we're seeing that would be hard to address, and I'm sure these are not listed and that's why they're happening, but this is definitely part of the problem from our perspective too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
if I may, that's definitely an issue. When we do housing inspections, we see some stuff.
Yeah.
That's
There's
why
no
the
doubt about
permit's
it.
important.
Anyone else like to add to the picture? Please come ahead.
In the old days, when I was in college, my friends would come here and they would work in various places just for the summer, and they lived in dormitories. Are there any dormitories, in fact, just summer dormitories? These are buildings that they had rooms, I guess they had a municipal kitchen, but there was no heat. There also was no air conditioning either, because they were just being used for 3 or 4 months in the summer.
Not really. We used to have like the Brothers Four Hotel, and all the
The one down
workers would
here.
stay up there. The Falmouth Hotel on the corner was also summer
That was just
workers
bought.
would stay there. We do have a project on Main Street where someone is trying to rehabilitate an old nursing home and provide some of that type of dormitory-style living, but we don't really have much of it right now.
I was just wondering, down in Woods Hole, where they have quite a bit of property, whether dormitories could be put up there.
Well, there are some employers in town who do buy housing for their employees. Mr. Zammer, I guess,
Right.
is the primary example, and he's now not here, but he made a point of housing his employees.
Right.
I think that there are others who do that, and I don't happen to know their names. I do know that there's not nearly enough of it. We don't have any kind of a zoning provision for dormitories.
Okay. That answers the question. Thank you.
It does.
Answer your question.
I obviously don't represent the Marine Biological Laboratory, but I can speak a little bit on behalf of the dormitories that are available there, just to answer your question. So there's a huge influx of summer students because of the summer programs that these institutions have, and so those are not available for year-round employees. They're used by summer education programs, and they're full. So that's not a resource that we could tap into as year-round employees. It is a resource that's used for summer students coming in. And, it'd be great if employers could provide housing, but that's, kind of a unrealistic, I think, expectation to expect your employer to provide housing. But I know that some employers are forced to do that here because they have no other options. So just wanted to answer your question.
Sari, what kind of information flows through the building commissioner's office about short-term rentals, or other rentals?
Just basically what Scott's been reporting, we have very little teeth. We can't go on people's property. We take the complaints, we contact the owner, ask them if they're renting. That's Basically, there's no regulations. The only ones that have regulations are the affordable units that are approved through the ZBA where they condition certain things.
Yeah, when I went in 2008 and filled out the thing at the health department, Robin was there, and she was like, geez, I don't remember the last time anybody came in here to register a rental, but that was quite a while ago.
Yeah, very few register with the Board of Health. How many would you say you had right
Oh,
now?
I said that at the beginning, it's about 200 and 250. It's not enough, because we're not going out actively, we have to seek them out.
Yeah.
So that's what the companies do, they need to be sought out in order to make that determination, right? So, yeah, look at Walker Street, I couldn't tell you whether the house, 3 houses down, has got 2 rental units in it, 1 rental unit, 5 rental units, no rental units, they're renting out, I wouldn't inherently know it by driving them down, so it's only when we find out, right? And that's where these companies can come out, at least on the short-term end, they can't go on, I don't think it's gonna inherently help the scenario with the basement apartment year-round type of thing, because this is, those companies
Well,
catch our STRs.
quite a few of those are grandfathered in, too, that they've been around for years, like the one that I
We have a
had.
huge problem now with RVs, and people living in RVs in the yard, and the neighbor complaining in the RV, and somebody's there. You know, we tell them
Quite a few.
that there's a lot of that going on, and there's a lot of apartments that are substandard. And then, you know, so, yeah, it's just been something that was written and not really done with forever and a day, and we need to do something at least with this, or revise this. And like I said before, we just need to put some more teeth in exactly how the whole process will happen. You know, the fines, where the fines go, how much the fines are, how do you appeal a fine, you know.
And the possibility of revocation of a permit.
And then, you know, the appeal, you know, are they going to appeal that? Would they appeal that in housing court, or do they go to district court, right? Because somebody might appeal our decision not to, and what happens with that. And I think this is being what I call a one-page regulation, doesn't have all that outlined, right? I mean, Title V is like 200 pages. This thing's a one-page, or it doesn't give me a lot of the detail that I need to do it. You know,
So we've been taxing the short-term rentals and kind of looking at it as like a gift horse and using it for affordable housing, and which is good. But we were at 13.6, I think, previously, and now we've added the 3% community impact fee. Maybe it's time we think about maybe some of that community impact fee should be allocated towards the impact, because we're gonna need some more resources, apparently. We're gonna need some sort of a housing department of some sort. And we're gonna need things like these companies, this Granicus or whatever, to do this assessment for us, because we don't wanna start from scratch, and they're already working on it. And apparently this group that I spoke with this week has developed a relationship with these short-term rentals, both Airbnb and VRBO, whereas previously they weren't so willing to talk with them. But now that these land court decisions are coming down on the wrong side of the Airbnb position, they're realizing that they should work with us. So I think it's good timing for us to start this group.
yeah, they're very good at finding and getting you to register. So the complaints will still come locally, the real complaints,
Oh,
right?
yeah, they're not
The
gonna-
lady, the pink, sorry, I forgot your name, like, what her complaint, and heard it, you know, we talked a lot last year, is the determination part of it, right? So that's not, they can't really help us boots on the ground thing, but yeah, they're really good at finding them. GovOS is another one. There's a bunch of different companies out there that have grown since that.
But there's more that we can do about that, because there's, where are we going to even allow them? It's
Well,
not just,
that's
it's
what-
not just finding ones that want to be that. The town actually has the authority to restrict them and can assert that authority. The Massachusetts Land Court recently heard a case coming out of Linfield. I don't know if any of you read about it. It was sent to me, and I was glad to get it, saying that someone in Linfield was very annoyed by short-term rentals for their noise, for the parking, for the things that you've brought up. And it went to the land court, which is, I think, the highest court it can go to, isn't it, Maura? That's sort of the final word.
No, that's one of the lower courts, the land court. There's, you can go to the appeals court after that.
So it can be appealed
But are
beyond
you
that.
talking about the Styler case?
I've remembered it as the Linfield case. Is it the
I think
same?
it's the same thing. It went to the land court and then it did go to the appeals court.
Could you
So-
say what the finding was?
I don't know the finding off the top of my head, but it would be applicable to what we're talking about here. And again, I'm going back to this policy thing, because we can't create regulations until I get direction about exactly what you just started talking about. do you want to completely ban them in certain places? Do you want to have them be as of right in certain places? Do you want to require a special permit in certain places? Those kinds of determination need to be made about different zoning districts throughout Falmouth before we can create this law. But what the Styler case did is it said that it interpreted the definition of commercial accommodations within the existing bylaw as applying to this newfangled idea of short-term rentals. So even though there wasn't something specific in the zoning bylaw that said short-term rental, for years there had been a prohibition or regulation about commercial accommodations. So what the land court and the appeals court then did was they said, well, just because it doesn't say short-term rental specifically, we're going to interpret this clause of commercial accommodations as applying to short-term rentals. So if you choose to do so, if that's the direction that this working group wants to go, where we're going to start talking about prohibiting short-term rentals as a use in certain areas and only allowing it by special permit, or completely banning it altogether, we're going to use the Styler case. We'll have that as support, though, even though it doesn't say short-term rental anywhere in our existing bylaw, there are places that we can use already to interpret short-term rentals to be incorporated into the bylaw.
Well, wouldn't it be true that we're going to be better off as a group designing our new rules on things that have already been found and tried through the courts and will hold up, so that we don't try to create something that'll go to court and we'll lose?
Right, you have options. There's ways that I can support this group, but you have to help me out and figure out what you want to do first, and I'll figure out a way to.
But correct me if I'm wrong, because what I read about the Linfield case, yes, what you said, but part of their finding was that the way their bylaw was written, their zoning bylaw is written, that unless it's specifically allowed in the zoning bylaw, then it's prohibited. For example, in Falmouth zoning bylaw, it says very definitely, unless we allow you to do something in a particular area, say a residential area, any one of the residential areas, unless you're specifically allowed to do it, then it's prohibited. You can't do it. And apparently Linfield's zoning law was written in the same way, and it's commonplace. Probably many places are like that. So we're already halfway there.
Yes.
So that commercial operations are in fact prohibited in residential areas because they're not allowed.
Well, what the Styler case says is that you can interpret it that way. It doesn't necessarily say that that's the definitive. We don't have to interpret our bylaw that way.
No, but we could build on that.
Yes.
We can build on that.
We have an
So the
opportunity
complaint
to
that
do
you
that.
brought forward, that this is a business that people are running in your residential neighborhood, it is a business. But where's the line for business? If it's owner occupied and only occasional, is that a business?
We should have an exemption for a owner-occupied, one resident. So we've got an elderly couple that wants to rent out.
It's not fair to the folks at home if you don't.
I think you need
We are
to-
actually televised.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you.
I think we should have an exemption for a single-family house that wants to rent out one room in their house. So that eliminates the hardship thing. Couple is, their kids have moved on, they have extra rooms, they've got a teacher that wants to come down for the summer, they want to rent out one room in the house that they occupy. They must occupy the house for the exemption. Not something that they're going to rent out one room in the house or house.
And owner occupied would cover quite a few of the short-term rentals that we have here in town, wouldn't it?
Owner
As far as we
occupied,
know.
I think he's saying they're also in the house, is that right? But you can't have that. Can you rent out a room in your house?
Sure you can.
If you live there?
Yeah, you can have up to 4 boarders.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very common,
But
actually.
let's put a limitation on it. For the exemption for the short-term rental, one renter in a house that you now occupy, that you are occupying while the renter is there. So you can rent out your one room and be exempt. Okay? This just gets away from
It's a border.
the hardship thing, okay? The other thing is, Scott, what are you doing with restaurants, hotels? Are you able to walk into those? They're public businesses, am I correct?
Well, yes, they are public businesses. A home, well, unless I'm told I can do that, I don't know if I could just go into a home like I can go into a restaurant.
Wait a minute.
I don't think I can.
We're not talking about a home now. We're talking about short-term rental.
So
So if you call, my answer would be, I don't think I can.
I could
You
say,
can't.
I would say it's similar to when you apply to Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
You sign a paper that says you agree that Conservation Commission staff can enter the property to do inspections at their discretion. We'll have a similar type of thing here, where you're gonna, right now.
Well, enter the property, I don't think they're allowed to enter the house in conservation.
Maybe that might be true, but we'll.
Yeah, so I need to be in the house
we'll have
to make it so.
Businesses are licensed through the Board of Health.
He actually needs a separate group of people to enforce the licensing. Does the town of Falmouth have a license enforcement?
Only for different type licenses, for like animal control and so forth, but not for this.
Well, I mean, for everything.
Not for renters, we do not.
Who's enforcing the hotels?
Well, we issue a hotel motel license.
Okay, and who enforces it?
Well, we do.
Who's we?
The health department. Does motels and hotels, yes. Yep. Bed and breakfasts.
Fire department and the Board of Health.
Fire department we go out as well. Building department would go out for life safety. They do a life safety inspection of it.
But my point is there somebody, there's nobody in town that's actually, that if you say they need to do something and they don't want to do it, who are you going to call to go to take them to court?
We haven't got there yet.
So you're talking about, so a motel, let's say,
Talking about.
so if a motel needed to be closed down
Yeah.
and have their license revoked, we would do that, and they'd have a hearing with the Board of Health, would be how I would handle that.
Okay.
So if a restaurant, was really bad, we did one tomorrow, and we had to close it, we would do it immediately, and then they would have a hearing with the Board of Health to be reopened. So those things are, but right now, I've interpreted that, house to be a house in a residence, not something I can just, so.
It's basically a hotel.
Okay, so yeah, granted, so I would look at it like this. Off the top of my head, the police department probably knows where a lot of the homes that are dealing drugs out of, but they just can't walk in, knock the door down tomorrow and take it all. They need to have a warrant, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at houses as something I would need legal authority to go into without being invited in. That's how I would interpret a home.
Yeah, you cannot just walk into a house.
So I'm not incorrect. That's how we have been doing it.
But you can walk into a hotel
Yes.
if there's a problem.
Yes.
Okay, but I think you should notice something that's really important in what you're saying. Hotels and motels, commercial accommodations can only be where they're zoned. You're crossing a zoning line. The problems that we're looking at are problems in residential neighborhoods, in residential districts.
we're looking at two
They're
different
zoned
things.
residential.
Instead of getting too far into the details, there's a line starting to back up, but let me just give you briefly how I think it would probably go. Right now, it looks like the courts are leaning towards, this is a business use in a residential area. I think if we wanted to, we could just shut it all down right now and probably legally survive, but I don't think that's really what we want to do. I think we want to figure it out.
It'll never happen. We need rules so people can
Exactly.
do within reason.
That's right, and so that's what we're gonna do, and once they sign up to be a part of this program, they're gonna agree to certain conditions. When they do, they're gonna agree to things like, we're gonna come and respond to problems, and if you don't answer our phone calls or return them in a timely way, you're at risk of losing your status with this rental project, so.
All I'm saying is, we need one small body that will take them to court, so,
I agree with you.
so
You're
Scott
right.
doesn't
You're
have to do
right. The
it.
experience in every town that's tried this is it has to be staffed. If you do not have a registration rule with a high enough registration fee to pay for the staff that you need to enforce it, you're not going to get anything.
I give you one
You're
other
right.
answer. They're a commercial business. Their property should be temporarily zoned, or actually taxed commercially, not zoned, taxed commercially.
Well, it is that already, 17.6%, I believe.
Yes.
And that's paid by the.
I'm talking about the real estate tax now.
Oh,
Wait.
No,
okay,
there's
okay.
actually short-term rental tax that people have to pay. That's what Mr. Brown.
The board.
Yes, and
Board.
and I agree with him, and I'm very glad you said that we need to take a good part of that money and increase the Board of Health 2, 3, 4 times if necessary, because It can't be that we add 20 cops and make them do it, but I will say, from things that I have read, I think it's Nantucket made their rentals a minimum of 7 days. Because right now what it is there's a lot of people who bought homes during COVID thinking that somehow COVID was going to last forever and they would work from home and be able to live on Cape Cod forever. And a year or two went by and they realized they can't do that anymore. So now they're renting it out because there's no minimum in the town right now. You can rent your house out one night at a time. It is at the homeowner's discretion. That is a hotel. And by making it a hotel, somebody says, all right, I'll spend $700, $800 a night. My next door neighbor gets $2,000 a night because he had very bad offerings on his website. If you make it a week, you get a different clientele that comes in, classier people who care because they're there for a week, and the health department can be called while they're there. But when you have the people who come on Friday afternoon and leave Monday morning, there's no way to enforce it, even if it was a law. There's no one right now who can come and make it, but if you have it for a week, that, okay, maybe people aren't making as much money, but at the same time, there's a way to enforce it, and again, you're getting, less people are willing to rent out their house. Like our next door neighbor, in a period of 2 weeks, can rent out their home for 4 different sets of people. We've had over 100 different people staying at the house next door to us in the period of less than 14 days. That's ridiculous. They're not even supposed to have that many because, again, their rule is 6, but they have up to 50 people and more staying at their home. And so I think that's something to take into consideration is the length of rental, because I think it's unrealistic to say you can't have short-term rentals in any town on Cape Cod. They had been doing that for decades. That's why these laws were created in the 1970s, because it was even happening then, and it's going to continue forever, or else all of Cape Cod will shut down because we are a resort town.
And part of the issue is we don't have a lot of hotels and motels.
Yes.
So we really, for travel and tourism, we need a certain degree of short-term rentals so that we can continue to have, businesses see that travel and tourism for the months that people are here.
7 days is a great idea.
Yeah.
That's what
I think
does.
We're
We don't
Saturday
do
to
anything less than
Saturday.
7 days.
Yeah, but we don't do.
I'd like to
Saturday
say,
only.
I'd just like to say, we were scheduled to go till 4:30. We're a little bit over time. I'd like to hear what the other 2 people wish to contribute before we close, and we need time ourselves to decide when we're going to be meeting again and how often. So let's hear from 2 more people, and then we'll speak among ourselves. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. I'll keep it short. I've done a fair amount of research into what other communities are doing, so when you get to that point, I'm happy to leave my contact information and save you some legwork looking into communities close and far. There's a fair amount of comparison between what's happening on Cape Cod and what's happening in ski towns in Colorado, for example. And there's some pretty good models out there. There's a bunch of different approaches that communities have taken, and I'm happy to share. I've got on my laptop there 22 pages of single-spaced notes from my research.
Could you
So,
please give Melinda your contact
make sure
information?
to connect. And I would just share, we've been talking a lot about restrictions and sort of punitive measures, but a lot of the communities that have found success by pairing punitive measures with incentives. And those incentives are designed to help encourage short-term rental managers and owners to actually rent year-round to members of the community. And there's, again, different models for how that can work. There are ways to fund that other communities have found to be successful, including just launching about 2 weeks ago in Provincetown. They are doing this and incentivizing long-term rentals while also taxing and adding fees for short-term rental registration. So they're trying the stick and the carrot at the same time, and other communities have found that to be really successful. It also, incentivizing is a much more straightforward, if it's a voluntary incentive program, it's a much more straightforward legal process than it is to restrict. So just wanted to share that.
And the select board has been sending letters in support of that.
I had one brief comment. You were talking about an exception for homeowners who might want to rent to one person. My husband and I are in the situation now where we have 4 extra bedrooms, children gone, foster children grown and moved out. And I'm very well aware of the situation with the scientists at MBL because I also work there. And we would be in the position of possibly wanting to rent short, not 7 days short term, but say the summer months to visiting scientists or year-round scientists. Would you object to that kind of an arrangement?
One renter to one house with the owners living in the house at the same time.
Why one renter? What if it's a married
Well,
couple?
Excuse me, we're not going to make this a general conversation at this time.
I will say that we do have zoning provisions for boarders that are more than one. It's already in place, so you already can do
Right.
that by right.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. I want to bring a pad of paper back there. If you want to be on an email list to receive the same packet of information that we're receiving, so it can just go out by
I have an extra
email,
pen.
great, then please put your email on this pad.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Mhm.
I think perhaps the better option for people who want to be informed is there's a system online called Notify Me. They can sign up for that. It's a subscription service, so anytime we post an agenda for this board or for this working group, if you sign up for the planning board notifications, you will receive the agenda in your inbox. So it's a much easier and better way than, perhaps a list of emails. But it's Notify Me. You can Google it or just go right onto the town's website and just search Notify Me, and you can just follow the prompts along there. Just make sure you sign up for the planning board notifications.
And we're also going to be making we're in the process of doing a web page on the planning page for short-term rentals. So all of the information that we have at the meetings will be available to click on and read whenever it's convenient for you.
And the Notify Me idea is great, and it's very helpful, but also, if you feel like there's stuff that you want to share with us, it wouldn't hurt to put your email on there, because that could be a resource for us.
It is a resource for us to know that you were here for the first hearing. I'd really like to know. So that'd be great, thank you. And thank you for coming. Now, on a schedule of how often we ought to meet, I think this is going to take less time than I thought. Maybe we could step it up and try to make it for an earlier town meeting.
I'm all for it, but I don't think we should volunteer staff to work overtime.
Appreciate that. Maybe just start off once a month.
It seems really slow.
If you would like to do possibly every 3 weeks.
You and I can work together in the interim and be more prepared for the meeting.
You'd like to do that every 3 weeks?
So what we had originally intended was to do it before so the planning board meets twice a month.
Right.
The last Tuesday of the month, or the fourth Tuesday of the month, is typically when we would have the working group meeting. It works out that way because then, obviously staff can then attend the planning board meeting. I would recommend to start off in that way, especially considering your second meeting is likely going to include a lot of discussion about what other municipalities are doing. That's going to be a lengthy conversation, so it gives us ample time to put together the packets for you and for the public to share any of their information with us that might be helpful. So for the next meeting, I would at least recommend give us 4 weeks so that we can put all that information together, because there's a lot of information on it.
So what would that date be?
Excuse me.
It would be
28th, May 28th.
May 28th.
May 28th? Is that something you all can do?
Okay.
At 4:30.
Is Memorial Day previous weekend or the one after?
Yeah. And what is allowable for this kind of a working group? If we two want to get together, can we ask other members of this group to meet with us also?
Well, then we'd have to have a quorum and a posted meeting.
Right.
So you can't go beyond 2? Or 3?
No, I think it's probably just the chair and the vice chair really should do the organizational type stuff.
I thought it was no more than one, but I will defer to our
I think we should look into that.
What are you trying to?
So
We
it's not a
did 3
quorum?
for Mr. Cobb.
I think we were
wanna meet.
in error for many years in Falmouth, thinking that 7-member boards could have 3. And we recently had a revelation that really wasn't correct?
That would be a revelation. Okay, so
This one's for you. Staff members normally are not voting members on a policy.
You were made part of a working group.
Okay, so we'll be on this one, okay.
we won't be forming the policy.
Like
We'll be
when Board of
recommending
Health
a policy
regulations
to
and
the
board-
planning board.
Okay, just wondering, just asking.
So it's a 6-member system, obviously you would need 3 at least to make a quorum.
But didn't we just have a training last year that said that you shouldn't really go by those numbers, because really, I think we determined that 2 was the max on the select board, didn't we?
I mean, I would recommend any conversation that you're gonna have, you do in a public setting.
Okay.
Just keep it at that, because it is an important topic. Put it all on the table in the
And
public
so
setting.
even between the chair and myself, it should only be for organizational and not
Right.
for substantive functions.
Scheduling issues, types of things, but not discussing any sort of,
What are we gonna do? Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, if that's the rule, that's the rule.
But
Okay,
like
so
you
I'm-
said, and I think it's pretty clear cut what our mission is. I don't think it's really gonna take a long, long time to come up with what it is that we need to do. And I'm sensing a sort of a consensus in the room already that we don't want to completely eliminate short-term rentals. We want to create a provision to manage them effectively and to allow for the residents that need to do short-term rentals to maintain that. And we just want to make sure that we're not just sold out to a big corporation who's coming in here and buying up swaths of land. That's my objective.
It's my objective also, but I think that I get the sense that we have yet to hear from the real estate industry that in fact is making a living off of this. And I think we don't want to have ignored that input when we set about making some rules. We can't just deny people their income.
I agree, and I'd say judging from the turnout we got here in the first meeting, we're gonna have even more at our next meeting, and that'll be good.
That would be good. Okay then, so we're going to meet again.
How is the word getting out about this group? Because I hadn't heard about it until recently.
It is just a recent occurrence.
Yeah, so is there any, like, how is the
We'll
word
put it on
getting
the
out?
website, I can reach
Yeah.
out to,
I was just gonna say, we'll reach out to the Falmouth Enterprise and see if they can run a story.
and they can recap the meeting that's being recorded, so they can
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, I understand the real estate agents get together informally.
Yeah, so tomorrow, Wednesday mornings is the MLS tour, which I generally attend, so I can always be a voice there if need be. At least get it out to them.
And then, of course, tell your neighbors and tell your friends. But I would suggest, oh, sorry.
The next agenda, the item, the topic.
Comparable towns and policies.
I would suggest that we provide, the planning department provides sort of a synopsis of the zoning bylaw and what provisions are included in that may relate to short-term rentals, or at least close to that.
And a copy of the Barnstable bylaw. I understand from Melinda earlier this week that Barnstable is the only town on the Cape so far that has a bylaw on short-term rentals. I think Provincetown has been working on it, and I thought they had one, but apparently not yet.
I think
They
Yarmouth.
just passed it. Attorney General just approved it.
Ah.
We've got West Tisbury, we've got Yarmouth.
Yarmouth just,
mentioned.
yeah.
So there definitely are
Chatham.
communities.
I think
Not sure
Chatham.
about Chatham.
Chatham did pass one.
Where?
Chatham.
Okay, let's have the copies of the ones that are from the Cape. That'd be good, and any decisions by the land court or the appeal court from that would shape what we're doing.
Do you want to group that into one meeting? We were thinking perhaps, sort of take what our municipality's doing as one agenda item and then talk about court cases in another agenda, but again, it's up to the
Let's
work
have them
group.
together, and we'll get as far as we can.
I mean, the court case review is gonna be quick, there's only been
It
a
is.
few, and I
Yeah.
think they're pretty similar. From
And
what I could
supportive.
see. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Excellent.
glad you're all willing to do this, thank you.
Should probably adjourn the meeting.
Oh,
I make a motion that we adjourn?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned, thank you, thank you.